So today we're going to talk about the effects of the Nollywood movies on the image of the African people. Now, we've discussed a whole lot about this whole Africans idol worshippers because most of the times people get to watch most of these movies and feel like, okay, this is what Africans do. Nollywood itself have put in a lot of effort these days, and they are trying to portray the African culture in a positive light. But when you look at the whole thing, especially when it comes to the cultures and tradition of our people, you see iota of colonialism, because of course in all that we believe, all our beliefs and everything have been affected by colonialism. So you see it even in all these Nollywood movies, right? Where you see they say Baba, immediately you hear Babalao or you hear a native doctor, what comes to mind is charms. What comes to mind is going to collect charms to do money rituals, to kill people, to make money, to unalive other people because somebody have taken your land, so you have to go and kill the person, or because this person is acting like this, so you have to go and collect medicine from a babalawo. And when you say babalawo, a native doctor, is in the forest, an old man in the forest, or an old woman, ugly old person, or scary people in the forest that do some of these abominable things. And it's not all true. This is it. This is what Nollywood paints the culture of African people to be, but it's not all true. It's not all true because um who is even a native doctor? A native doctor is a native doctor. How we have other doctors, we have, and why were they even called a native doctor? It's a colonial concept, Your Majesties. These are healers. These are people who communicate with ancestors. They see things we don't see. They speak with the spirits. They provide solutions to some of the things that are so difficult for us today. But since we have decided to drop those practices, of course, and embrace some other people's own, we see how our life have been today. That is it. Now, Nollywood want to portray these people as demonic, satanic people. So when you come in contact with them, you have to look for a powerful man of God that will come and speak in tongue and then cast and bind, and then thunder will come and thunder will scatter the native doctor and will destroy his power. And then you see some of the movies where these same people will say, okay, I have repented, I was evil, now I have repented. Well, come to think of it, I don't just get it. So people now get to watch most of these movies and begin to think that that is how all African native doctors, or how Babalawo is. So when you say Babalawo, oh my goodness, people will run away. They'll look at you like, oh my word. Anyway, this is what we find ourselves in today. So I'm going to take you through some things that explain in depth of what I'm talking about, right? Now, mind you, there are witches everywhere. There are wizards everywhere. It's not just in Africa. It's not just in the continent. There are witches and wizards everywhere. There are people who do blood rituals, occultic kingdoms and everything. They are everywhere. It's not just in Africa alone. So this whole reserving it for Africa, like it's Africans that do all these things, is not true. We have to stop it and propagate our culture in a positive light, as it should, not even as it should be, because that's not what we are doing. These people we call native doctors and the babalawo, they have their job. They are like the eyes. You're going to listen soon, but it's better we begin to stop looking at our cultures as we look at it in that colonial mindset and ideology. We begin to look at our culture for what it is and practice the good ones. Like I say, evil is everywhere. Good is everywhere. You can find goodness anywhere. You can find evil anywhere. It's not just restricted to Africa. Evil is not restricted to our babalawos, to our native doctors. It's not. And when you hear native doctor, or you hear babalawo, it's not evil. Totally, anyone that wants to use his or her powers to do evil is left for that person. That doesn't mean all are evil. I keep saying this, so this was our way of life. These were the people we consulted. These were the people our ancestors consulted to see, to communicate, to see what is going to happen in the future. When something happens, people don't understand. They go to this same babalawo and the and native doctor to go to know. When people are sick, they take them to this same native doctor and they get healed. So how come native doctor and babalawo have become something that is so evil that when you tell a child babalawo will catch you, hey, the child will run and cry.
This is a babalawo. If you grew up with Nollywood movies, babalawos are creepy old men who hide in forests and do bad things to people. But historically, some have suggested that we could compare babalawos to ancient professors of philosophy in Yoruba land. So how did we get from ancient professors of philosophy to creepy old people who live in forests and hurt people? Well, the short answer is colonialism, and the long answer is colonialism. Anyways, let's talk about this for a little bit. If you have never watched a Nollywood movie in your life, let me explain a little bit of what I'm talking about here. In many movies, what tends to happen is over the course of the story, somebody decides that they want to hurt somebody else. And so the way they decide to do that is to go consult a babalawo. That often just involves going deep into the forest and finding a hut or a shrine. And in that shrine, you find the creepy old man dressed in interesting ways with chalk around his eyes, usually asks for some random stuff like a baby chicken or something. And when you give him everything that he asks, he will use magic to harm the person that you're trying to harm. And over the course of the movie, the person you're trying to harm gets harmed by this magic. Typically, towards the end of the movie, the person that's being harmed goes to church and talks to a pastor and they pray. And in the course of their prayer, CGI lightning strikes the hut of the babalawo in the forest and brings their reign of terror to an end. So, happy ending. Now, because of this image, growing up, naturally I, like many Nigerians, saw babalawos as very evil things that should be avoided. I mean, it's fairly unlikely that you would run into one on the street or anything, but the term babalawo was immediately associated with the devil, Satan, evilness. Yet, as I've mentioned, babalawos could be likened to professors of philosophy in ancient Yoruba land. So how did we get here? Babalawo, directly translated, means something like keeper of secrets. And the secrets that babalawos are tasked to keep are the contents of the Ifa corpus. So let's talk about that for a second. This is Orunmila. He was the first babalawo, and if you've been following me for a while, you know that I've talked about him a little bit. Specifically, the work done on him by the philosopher Sophia Lowell, who has compared him with Socrates, because they were two originators of classical philosophy in their respective traditions. As for all the comparisons Dr. Lowell made between Socrates and Orunmila, we'll talk about that some other time. But yes, Orunmila was the first babalawo, and he's considered the Orisha of wisdom. This is sometimes wrongly translated as God of wisdom. Orishas are not necessarily gods, but they could be seen as spirits that flow out of God. They could also be seen as ordinary human beings who were extraordinary in their deeds or in their capabilities, and so the community elevated them to the status of Orisha. In this sense, Orunmila was a human being who was very wise, and so the community elevated him to the status of spirit of wisdom. He originated the Ifa corpus. There's a lot of literature on the Ifa corpus because it's been addressed by several Yoruba scholars over the past couple of years. According to Sophia Lowell, the Ifa is not philosophy, but it contains philosophy. It is not mathematics, but it contains mathematics. It's an important part of Yoruba philosophy, of Yoruba metaphysics. The Ifa can be used for a couple of different things. Most notably, it is used to predict the future. Essentially, if you go to a babalawo and ask him to consult the Ifa on your behalf, he's going to look at the readings of the Ifa, the beads and the stones, and he can tell you what your future might be. Now, regarding what might actually be going on here and what has happened here historically in terms of predicting the future, that's an interesting conversation, but for some other time. What we need to know is that the Ifa is an interesting divination system. It was originated by Orunmila and it was initially passed down orally, which was a very impressive feat because there are a lot of lines and poems to remember to contend with the Ifa, and Orunmila and his babalawos had to do this from memory. The purpose here is to point out that this is the origin of Ifa and babalawos, and it has really nothing to do with evil or witchcraft or Satan. We've gotten to the point nowadays where babalawos are indistinguishable from things of evil and things regarding the devil, in part because of the colonial experience. A clear but slightly different example of this phenomenon can be found with a Yoruba god called Eshu. Now, in several Yoruba to English dictionaries today, Eshu is translated as Satan. Eshu is the devil. However, historically, that is not what slash who Eshu was. Historically, Eshu has been defined as a very important part of how the Yoruba people organized existence in terms of their pantheon. Wale Soyinka refers to Eshu as a master dialectician, for example. He was the messenger of the gods. Olowale refers to him as a kind of policeman. For those of you familiar with Greek mythology, Eshu was basically Hermes, and if you're familiar with Egyptian mythology, he's basically Thoth. He ran errands, and his errands could either be good or bad depending on what was happening. And in essence, because of the range of his responsibilities, we could see him as a type of trickster god. But he was not necessarily evil, except now he's associated with Satan himself, the embodiment of evil. Of course, some people argue the existence of Satan in Christianity or Judaism, which are the traditions out of which Satan supposedly emerges, but that's a different conversation, of course. All this to say, the same fate that befell the Babalawos befell Eshu as well. These concepts, these figures, these ideas once respected historically have now been washed away and reinterpreted through a lens that really had nothing to do with them at all. This erasure has not been complete, nor has it been permanent. There's still a decent amount of respect for traditional Yoruba religion, not only in Nigeria, but across the world as well. There is a strong presence of people practicing Ifa. There's a strong presence of Babalawos in the Caribbean, for example. I remember a news story came out a couple of years ago talking about how a lot of prominent Nigerian politicians still consult the Ifa in secret. Even though generally speaking, as far as the social atmosphere back home in Nigeria is considered, Babalawos and the Ifa are still connected with a type of evil. Some have suggested, for example, that during Nigerian elections it might be beneficial to have Yoruba politicians swear an oath not on the Bible, but in the presence of a Babalawo. The idea here is that there is still a very present and prominent fear and reverence of these traditional systems, despite the fact that they have been, in a sense, replaced by other religious practices and beliefs. In either case, this is the fascinating story of Babalawos and of the god Eshu.
All right, Your Majesties, what do you think about this whole thing? Leave your comment and thought in the section, and I'll see you in my next one. Until then, love yourself, love others, stay safe, stay positive, always, Your Majesties. Bye for now.